Today is the third Sunday of Lent. Our gospel text is taken from the second chapter of John. It is John's account of the cleansing of the temple. Now, it's worth noting in passing that all four gospels have an account of Jesus cleansing the temple. John is particularly detailed. The other three gospels have the account towards the end of their gospels, just before the Passion narrative. It's fairly obvious why it would be there, because it is, in a sense, one good reason for the religious authorities to be angry at Jesus and seek his trial and death. The question arises, why would John have it at the beginning? Now, I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not going to pretend I do, but I think there's some value in exploring one aspect of this account that might give us a hint as to why John does it, but then also opens up a very practical issue for us today. It's the reference to the temple itself. Jesus says, "Destroy this temple. In 3 days I will raise it up." Now, the temple, and we're going to find out, using the building as a metaphor for his own being in the flesh, the incarnation. The Word became flesh and is here. This is the new temple. This is the new covenant. This is God in your midst, fulfilling the promise, "I am with you." The old temple, which was in fact the second temple, the first temple had been destroyed in the 6th century BC. Herod the Great had invested quite a lot in rebuilding this temple. Neither the Jewish authorities nor the disciples get it. Jesus was talking about himself. The disciples do get it after Easter. It's clear that the Jewish authorities did not. Now, that sets a frame of reference for the entire Gospel of John, the incarnation, God infleshed in the midst. This is the new order, a new covenant sealed in the blood of the Lamb of God. Jesus is the fulfillment of all that has gone before. The practical issue that arises here for the Jewish authorities, but more particularly for us, is the inclination that we all suffer from to turn means into ends. It seems that we find it a bit uncomfortable always being on the move, always traveling, never quite arriving. I think one of the implications of Jesus' teaching is we are pilgrims. We don't arrive here. We should never regard anything absolutely as a home. Means and ends ought to be clearly distinguished. Means are means. They're not ends. They're not to be clung to. The wonderful, brilliant Australian poet died a few years ago, Les Murray, practicing Catholic, a deeply good man and a deeply wise man, wrote an essay more than 60 years ago entitled "Some Religious Stuff I Know About Australia." Classic Les. Let me read to you a brief quotation from that I think links our times and our attitudes and our challenges with those of the Jewish authorities when they were challenged by Jesus. Les writes, "For many historical and other reasons, some of them Australian and our own fault, Christianity is no longer on top in Australia. Others will have gone into the modalities of this more effectively than I could do. All I have to add are some personal impressions. The first of these is that the experience is probably salutary for us. The time for Ecclesiolatry. I'd never heard that word before until Les used it here. Maybe he coined it. The time for ecclesiolatry, the worship of the visible church instead of God, is past. Ecclesiolatry is a very sophisticated way of saying we've turned the church into an end rather than a means. The church is not the kingdom. We don't live for the church. The church lives for us to enable us in our journey towards God. Sometimes we get that wrong. Sometimes we absolutize aspects of the church's life, roles, peoples, rituals. It's a challenge for people like myself who belong to a religious congregation that, to all appearances, is going out of existence. Now, if you have a worldly view of it, you say, oh, isn't that horrible? See, what can we do to make it continue? I think it's part of the means and ends reality. None of us has an absolute claim to anything that we have been part of or would like to see succeed. The focus is God. When Jesus challenges the Jews and says, you've turned my Father's house into a den of thieves or a marketplace, it is there for us to connect with the Father that was lost. A question that we can live with, in fact, should live with daily. Are we in our lives giving absolute value to something that's relative? Giving the value of an end to something that is a means?